All right, welcome back live at Drew's house. Another edition. Hope everybody is doing okay. I got the winter hat on today because we had snow on the ground. I've been shoveling for days. It seems like I'm getting, I don't know, it's like officially a long stretch of winter here. I've been doing a lot of shoveling the last couple of weeks. But anyways, hope everybody's doing okay. What has changed in the world? Well, what is old is new again. Tom Brady has won the Super Bowl again, just with a different team. But I hope you all enjoyed your Super Bowl Sunday and all that good stuff. One of the more unique ones we'll ever see, a Super Bowl in a pandemic. Hopefully the last one we see. Let's put it that way. Speaking of the pandemic, I'm going to bring in science writer Bill Sargent right now. Bill, nice of you to join us. First time on the show. How you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you. And very happy about the outcome of the game. That was one for the ages, or for the aged.
Yes, for the aging. Good point. Yeah, you know, I was saying I question the Patriots fan who is not rooting for Tom Brady. I have my doubts about those people as people. Why would you not root for the man?
Exactly.
Did a lot for us here, but anyways, today we're talking pandemic, and you have I guess some really interesting insight on what led to this pandemic. And why don't you start out right there, very generally, your thoughts?
Well, it's actually a very good time to be talking about this because the Washington Post just came out with an editorial requesting that China come forth on, what the actual origins of the COVID were. And the World Health Organization inspection team is in China now, and they're supposed to have a report on Wednesday. So I think what happened is that nobody's been talking about this while Trump was in office because he had made it so political. People didn't want to be tarred with the brush of being, conspiracy theorists. But it's always really been more true, more likely that it occurred from an accident doing what's called gain of function research. And this is where you take a virus, put it into a ferret, it mutates, you take it out of that ferret, you put it into another ferret, and after so many ferrets, the virus can jump from ferret to ferret, which means it can jump from human to human. And I think that's what was done, successfully. And then somebody made a mistake and they jabbed themselves in the finger, or the ferret, wiggled or sneezed, and that person got COVID and was sent to the hospital. And that's where the first 41 patients and doctors came down with the disease.
Interesting. So we have heard this whole thing about the wet market and all that, and you think that could be true just in this kind of ferret way, or whatever the animal may be. Is this a common kind of testing? You test different, whatever.
Yes, it's the standard test for flu. So what happens when flu breaks out in Asia? They start doing this gain of function research to figure out what the next flu is going to be that's going to be in the West in the coming year, so that they can make a vaccine. So it's a very standard thing. There are basically sort of four scenarios that we were looking at. Initially, it was that the virus came from the Wuhan seafood center. And that was fairly quickly discounted because they couldn't find any viruses in the animals in the seafood market. And then the second one is that it came from nature. But the problem with this scenario is that what you have to have for a pandemic like this, you have to have both a reservoir organism, which would be the bats, that would be a reservoir for the viruses, and then also what's called an amplifying organism, and that's where the viruses amplify and become more powerful and can become transmissible from human to human. And they've never been able to find an amplifier organism. Usually, you'll have something like a pig, or a chicken, or a duck, or something that's so when you talk about an avian flu or, a swine flu, you're actually talking about the amplifying organism. And then the third scenario was that it was a biological agent. And I don't think we have enough information to know about that. And then the fourth one, which I think has always been the most plausible one, is that a mistake was made doing this kind of research.
So let me ask you this: would you, under this theory, say it is that? Would the Chinese people, would they know? Do they know, and it's become a political football here?
I think they do know, and I think the people who are most concerned about this are the Chinese people themselves, particularly in Wuhan, because a lot of them have lost family members. And they're really ticked off because not only did China not tell the West that the disease was transmissible from human to human, but they didn't tell the local people. So they were, they were assuming that you could only get it from bats. And in fact, it was transmissible, and thousands and thousands of people died because of it.
So there's probably under this scenario, there's a bunch of different ways. You said an accident, but it could be, literally an animal sneezing in the researcher's face or something, maybe a finger prick. I think you said there's probably a bunch of different ways that can happen, but it is in the end just some sort of accident. Yes. Yeah. That's fascinating. And you mentioned this becoming political because as I sit here and talk to you, I guess in my head, you still don't know, but I still had not really, I certainly hadn't ruled out the whole wet market thing like you kind of have. And I mean, this is something that has stopped our world for a long period of time. And we really aren't talking about getting to the bottom of it, at least not in my household and not at my work and not really in my community, about where this thing happened. And maybe that is the politics of it all. But it's fascinating to me that it's not this topic of conversation.
Well, I think the other story is a journalism story. And that the mainstream the mainstream media hasn't picked up on this because they didn't want to be tarred with the brush that they were, giving airtime to conspiracy theories. So the story really hasn't been told. Now I think it's about ready to bust wide open. Now that the Washington Post has come out with that editorial, and that you're going to get the World Health Organization team coming out with their report. I think everybody's going to start looking into this.
So what, besides the fact that just your deductive reasoning tells you this is percentage-wise, this is probably what happened, and you said you've thought that from the beginning. Besides that, is there any other clues just by watching the months that have dragged on that has said, I'm even more convinced now, this is just everything falls under this umbrella of this was an accident? Yeah.
I think the main thing is that, the theory is if it came from nature, it would be like if there was a disease in bats in Georgia. And then all of a sudden you started having exactly the same disease appear in Boston or appear in Cambridge, where we have a level 4 biocontainment facility, the same sort of biocontainment facility that you have in Wuhan. And you could maybe make up a story that, somebody was catching bats and drove them 1,000 miles up to Wuhan, but it makes a lot more plausible sense that somebody was working on the same bat at the in the biocontainment facility and a mistake was made.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. So again, we're joined here by Bill Sargent, science writer, talking about something that I have not had many conversations about it. I guess you learn how to deal with the virus because it's here no matter what and it's not going anywhere. And then maybe this is a common approach as you figure out afterwards what went wrong. Maybe this is the way it's supposed to go. Is this the way it's supposed to go with the pandemic?
No, I think this was a political situation. I think if it had been any other administration, would have looked into it right at the beginning, and it would have been a scientific question, not a political question. I think as soon as it got painted with the political brush, then it was sort of swept under the rug.
And of course, everybody knows about Chinese culture too, and just the pride that is taken in individual households, in work, in athletics, in pretty much everything. You ever watch the Chinese at the Olympic Games, and it's just the pride that's taken in the flag. It's just certain things like that. It jumps out at you at the pride in the country that they take. That must play into this too, as far as this is going to be a something that they're going to be very careful with, and I can imagine.
Yeah, and I think I feel kind of sorry for them, because they were doing exactly what they should be doing. They were actually getting funded by the United States and working through the World Health Organization to do this gain of function research. And we realized that it was so risky that we had a ban on doing gain of function research in this country, but we kept on funding it for it being done in China. And then all of a sudden everybody was, hitting them over the head. And I think they were, justifiably a little bit ticked off about that. And I think the other thing that's going on now is that probably everybody is trying to save face a little bit, both for the Chinese, but also for themselves, because a lot of people are going to end up having egg on their face. Because, as I say, the United States was funding this, and they did it through an organization called EcoHealth, which was a British organization. And one of the team members for the World Health Organization is head of the EcoHealth. So he kind of has a reason, not to let this out. The other interesting thing, of course, is that there are no Americans on the World Health Organization inspection team because we pulled out of that organization.
It's interesting. I mean, at this point, does science win? And when the World Health Organization goes in, we're trying to get to the bottom of this? Or do you still think there are political games being played right now on the ground as they try to figure this out?
It's hard to know. I think what you're getting daily sort of interviews with some of the members, and I think they're walking a very fine line, because they don't want to say anything that's going to preclude them from getting into the labs and getting into the hospitals and seeing the data that they want to see. So I think they've been very careful about that. When they finally have seen everything and they'll come out with their report, that will be on Wednesday. I still think it's going to be sort of a preliminary report, because there are divisions within the team itself.
You talk about this line of work, and I imagine that, this is one of those lines of work where it's kind of like being a referee. You're only noticed when you do a bad job or something, right? I mean, I'm sure there's all sorts of diseases and viruses that have been, steered off of because of these great jobs that these researchers and these tests do. And this work goes on all the time, as you mentioned with the flu, but let me into those labs a little bit. Like, how I know there's going to be people around the world that are like, how could such a big mistake be made? How does this happen?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And there's actually a lot of debate about it, mostly in this country. So when we banned the use of gain of function research in this country, and it was being done at the University of North Carolina, and they were doing the collaborative work with China. There are a number of very prominent scientists and doctors in this country who are very, very critical of gain of function, and they're also looking at alternatives. So there are other things that you could do. You could use, cell cultures and various things like that. A lot of people argue that they're not as sensitive as doing a test in a live animal, because you have all of the physiology of the animal that's playing into it. But I think because it's so dangerous, I hopefully, the world will get together and say, this is so dangerous, we shouldn't do it. And we should make a real push to look into alternative forms of looking at gain of function.
Any other chance, break it down in your mind. You gave me those four options that what this could be. What percentage,
Right.
the one you're sure of, which is pretty sure of, is this accident? What percent are you sure that it's an accident? What would you leave room for doubt for as a scientist?
I'd give it a 90%. That's the most likely thing. Areas of doubt about that. Well, if somebody finds out something that's more plausible, I'm wide open to what the World Health Organization team comes up with. I'm a little bit skeptical that they're going to come up, with an unbiased report. But if they come up with something that's feasible, then that could very well be the answer. But I think the most likely thing is they're trying to figure out a way of saying that this was because of gain of function research without stepping on too many toes.
What would be the would you guess I know you're not in every lab in the world, but would you guess that there have been close calls like this before?
All the time. There was a group in Cambridge that did a study on this, and they found that on an average, every 2 weeks, there's a significant enough, accident in a laboratory that has to get reported to the World Health Organization. So, that's pretty scary.
I will never hear that and let it brush right by me again. Every 2 weeks, my goodness.
Yeah.
That's not good. I feel like that's not good.
That's totally not good. But one of the other clues that we have that something went wrong is that we started getting cables. The intelligence service and individuals started getting cables that people were sick in the Wuhan Institute for Virology. And I don't know if you remember when Trump he came out and in a press conference said he had high confidence that this came from a laboratory in Wuhan, and he said, I can't tell you, I'm not supposed to tell you how I know that. I think he probably just jeopardized an informant, either inside the laboratory or very close to the laboratory. Because so that's the reason we don't want to we don't want to give him intelligence reports.
So he was right when he was saying that. In your mind, you think he was right. He just in no way, shape, or form ever should have been mentioning that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I hope there's some sort of private diplomacy that's going on, and that everybody will sort of come to an understanding that they shouldn't be doing this kind of risky research, and we'll look for an alternative.
I would think a pandemic probably starts to get the ball moving in that direction, right?
Yeah.
Why do we go to this sort of research though? Why is it's being done for a reason? And I don't know if is it more convenient than something else? What are the pluses of this kind of research? Obviously, we've addressed the negatives.
Well, it's the standard way that you figure out what kind of vaccine to develop for the next year's flu. In other words, it's the best way to figure out what the configuration of the flu is going to be so that you could design a vaccine against that particular form of flu.
And how many labs in the world are doing this right now? Are we all talking all over? Or?
I think relatively few. And, I think Wuhan was probably the center because, most of the flus are coming from Asia. And that's the only level 4 biocontainment facility in the country. I mean, that was the thing that, for me, really triggered it. When I realized that it was the only biocontainment facility in all of China, that you just happen to have COVID start in that particular town. That makes you a little suspicious.
Yeah, I would imagine. And then so in 4 years, say we're living and everything's just back to normal, and I don't take anything for granted anymore. So I'm still saying hopefully for everything. But when say years down the road, we look back on this, do you imagine are we going to know all the answers in 4 years? I mean, eventually we're going to have this figured out.
I'd say maybe in 10 years we'll have it all figured out. I think we'll have a much better idea probably in the next year or two. We'll probably, for instance, one of the, I think they know the scientist who was doing the actual gain of function research, and he was also working with what are called humanized mice, and these are mice that had been modified so they have human, what are called ACE cells. If you're so young, you wouldn't have to take an ACE inhibitor, but you probably know of people who have had ACE inhibitors, because the ACE cells regulate your blood pressure. So they made this mouse as a model for humans. So they were really kind of designing a virus specifically for a human, which is, and again, that was and we know who that scientist, at least we've heard who it is. So hopefully somebody knocked on his door and asked him a few questions.
I would think so. And you mentioned too at the very beginning of this, and now the more I think about it, you're so right. When you talk about, say this becomes completely known that this was an accident, I'm assuming we know how contagious COVID is. Everybody who works in that lab is, probably right. There's a good chance they got COVID, and you're probably right that just by the numbers, that means there were deaths there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's going to be a pretty messy look back when you think about it. Man, this is a lot to get your head around. What is the Washington Post article? Wednesday, you said it's going to be in the Post, right?
No, they had an editorial this past Friday, saying that China should come clean and answer some questions about gain of function research, and whether it was an accident in a lab. The World Health Organization has this inspection team that's been in China for the last 2 weeks, almost for a month now, and their report is going to come out on Wednesday.
I remember when the World Health Organization touched down, and a lot of people were saying this is where we start to get some real answers. Hopefully we start to get those. Bill Sargent, this has been fascinating. Where are you coming to us from here?
I'm in Ipswich.
You're in Ipswich. Okay, lovely. You're not sleeping on the floor, are you? I see a sleeping bag behind you, I think.
No, I do yoga in the background. This is my all-around workspace. I write, do yoga, eat, sleep, the whole bit.
I'm picturing you studying the COVID-19 so hard you're never going to sleep except for just a quick nap on the sleeping bag. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. The interesting thing about this is, COVID really hasn't changed my life very much, because I have this sort of monastic life anyway, where I'm writing all the time, and so there's just fewer distractions.
Hang on one second, Bill. I'm just going to pause this and let the dog out. I felt it happening today. We'll take 5 more minutes. Yeah, my wife swears by the yoga. She tells me I should start doing it. Is she right?
Yeah, she is absolutely right. Yes. Yeah, I love it.
Very good. All right. Well, hopefully your family is all doing well through this pandemic in your own personal way. I know it seems to be hitting every family, at least in some way, but I hope everybody's okay.
Yeah. They are. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, good to hear. And what is your first thought? I just have to ask from a science perspective. When you, I mean, I'm sure 5, 10 years ago, if I asked you 10 years ago, let me phrase it this way. Will you live through a pandemic? Would you say chances are I will see one in my lifetime?
No, I don't think I would have said that.
Really?
We're all pretty aware of it now. I mean, we know that there are epidemics, and we know. I mean, the standard model is that you get an epidemic that does come from nature. These are called zoonotic diseases. AIDS was one, and there are similar ones like that. But I think the other thing that's a little bit suspicious is how successful this virus has been. I mean, it's just spread around like wildfire, and it continues, and now it's mutating.
Why do you use the word suspicious? What do you mean by that?
Well, that it could be, and in fact, it was selected to be very effective against humans. I'm not saying that it was necessarily designed, but it was selected through this type of research to be very effective.
Meaning that's what the researchers are going for. They want to find something to fight against it, and whoops.
Exactly.
I understand what you mean. Okay. This is a unbelievable. It's an unbelievable topic just because it is the world we're living in. And I really do feel like not a lot of people are. I mean, we heard the Wuhan Market. I remember the Trump comment on that. And I remember thinking to myself, is he just throwing stuff out there? Because and now you bring me back to that moment, and it has me thinking all over again. Maybe he did have that intel.
I think he had the intelligence. Yeah. So and it was too bad that it was him in the way he presented it, because as soon as he said it, everybody said, no, that's crazy. If he's proposing it, he's trying to, get the blame off of him. And that kind of set up the whole political situation.
Man, do you think the United States has been closed out in a lot of ways? Obviously, we're not on the ground here with these investigations just because we're not a part of it anymore. But do you think the U.S. is a superpower. If I can imagine, Joe Biden has a lot of friends, President Biden, he's been in this game a long time. I would imagine that the U.S. could probably get a footing involved in this a little bit. Do you imagine that's maybe happening a little bit more now, or have we just really, for a better word, pissed off China?
No, I think we've maintained sort of quiet contacts throughout this, and now Biden has brought us back into the World Health Organization. Yeah. So it wasn't in time to get people on this particular inspection team, but no, I think we're going to be back in good standing.
Seems like he tried. Wasn't that like day one, first thing he signed was we're back in?
Exactly. Yeah. There's another interesting thing. There was a report that came out a couple days ago, and it actually indicated that there are about 10 times more people that picked up COVID than were reported, and it also said that probably New York and North Dakota have reached what's called herd immunity. And that's when you have enough people that are immune to the disease, either through being inoculated or having had the disease before, that the disease will just disappear because there won't be any hosts left for it. And I have a feeling that that could, because there's been a drastic decline, a reduction in the number of cases. They peaked on January 9th, which was right after, you had everybody going home for Thanksgiving vacation and Christmas vacation. And you had that peak after that. And ever since then, the numbers have been coming down, really quite dramatically. So I would like to think that we might be much closer to herd immunity than we thought we were going to be.
Yeah, it's a kind of it's optimistic, but it's optimistic just by looking at the numbers, right?
Yeah, and of course, the counterweight to that is people are concerned about these new variants, the new mutations. And so it's really important that everybody gets vaccinated as soon as possible. And maybe I'm being a Pollyanna, but I'm hoping that if we're getting closer to this herd immunity, that the variants will be less of a concern. But you have to wait and see.
Real quickly, help me with the variants thing, because this virus is born just kind of a real third grade level stuff here. The virus is born. Then once it's out there, this is like a living, breathing thing. That's how these other variants come off of it, right?
Exactly, and we are now like the ferrets, because when we get a case of COVID, it's we fill up with millions and millions of viruses, and some of those viruses are going to have little tiny changes in them, and those are the mutations that make the new variants of the virus.
And we are like the ferrets now. I think I'm going to carry that one with me for the rest of the afternoon.
Yeah.
Well, Bill Sargent, this was fascinating stuff. I usually end the show with some rapid fire. I know we did a lot of serious topics here, but you game for a couple of fun questions to end it?
Sure.
And one more serious one before we do that. Lessons to be learned from this pandemic 2020-21. What are the lessons to be learned for research? What do you take from it?
Well, I'm hoping people will seriously look at getting alternatives to this gain of function research, because I think it's too dangerous to be continuing to do that. It could lead to the next pandemic.
All right, we'll leave it at that on that topic. Great information. All right, rapid fire. Favorite musician?
Oh my goodness. Tom Rush.
Tom Rush, who was just on this show a couple weeks ago.
Oh, terrific. Good.
And turns 80 years old today.
Wow.
How about that? All right, there you go.
Yeah.
A lot of information on that answer.
You can't beat these old guys, They're playing football, they're becoming presidents, they're top of their form singing.
Yes, old and recreating themselves every day. My goodness, he's still releasing new stuff. Favorite movie?
Let's see. 2001.
All right. Favorite book? Can't be your own.
I'm reading a book now called Stilwell and the China Experience. It's a fascinating book.
Is there any? Are you trying to find more tidbits of information into what happened in China?
I actually am. It's a wonderful insight into the whole Chinese culture and their way of life. Yeah.
All right, very good. Last couple. Favorite city or favorite place in the world to visit?
Taormina on Sicily.
Okay, very good. Favorite food?
Sicily is the soul of Italy. You can have Florence, you can have Rome. Go to Sicily.
Okay, that's good. There you go. For anybody thinking about traveling.
My great grandfather came from Capodimonte in Napoli.
Wow, you cannot fake that rolling of the. What do they call it?
I can fake it pretty well.
Oh, very good. Favorite food?
Scungili.
Okay, very good. I could have guessed we were going to stay in that ballpark. And what is what drew you to science, being a science writer? What was it that grabbed you as a youngster or whenever it grabbed you?
I've always been interested in nature. Just as a kid, I was the kid all the time who was out in his boat, and I remember we in the summer we would go down to the Cape, and my parents at the end of the summer said, well, you can go out on the boat, but be sure you're back at 10 o'clock because we have to drive back up to Boston. And of course, I didn't show up until 6 that night. And my family was not very pleased.
And lastly, I will ask you for the youngsters out there. It's going to be the topic of my time, really, or at least one of them, post-pandemic and all this. But we have this presidential election. So much of it was climate change, and I'm always curious just to get a different scientist's opinion on the changing planet as it is, and just your take.
Well, I think sort of every day that new studies come out, we're finding that the climate change is worse than what we expected. The glaciers are melting faster, the temperatures are going up. We've actually kind of had a really fascinating experience, without planes flying and without a lot of people driving cars and stuff like that. The air is much cleaner. And I think a lot of people thought, well, the climate is going to cool down because of that. But actually, some of the things that we were putting up into the atmosphere were blocking things so that the planet was actually heating up at the same time. Yeah. So yes, it's a growth industry. If you're a kid looking for what you want to do with yourself, go into environmental or into medical research. And I understand that a lot of people are making those decisions now.
Absolutely. Well, we could do a whole nother show on that, I'm sure. The change in climate. Maybe we will at some point through all this. Bill Sargent, that was fascinating. Thank you so much for all that insight. And it seems like we're about to learn a whole lot more in the weeks, months, years ahead, as you said.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. I enjoyed it as well. My dog's yelling at us. Apparently it's time to stop. He's outside and he says, it's time for the walk.
Yeah, he wanted to ask a few questions.
They tend to make appearances on the show. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, Bill Sargent, there you have it. Man, that was interesting. And he's a smart guy. So we'll see if what he believes, and it does. It's interesting some of the stuff he said from his knowledge of these things and how it, in his mind, this probably played out right from the beginning to what President Trump said in the middle. He thinks a slip. Man, that was fascinating information that like I said, we're going to be learning a lot about. I'm going to leave it right there. I can't really add much to that, except for the fact that I'm going to be thinking about it all day now. Maybe you'll do the same. Have a good one, everybody. Stay safe. Social distance. Be careful. It's slippery out too. A lot of snow on the ground still. Sidewalks. I'm going to go shovel mine. Bye-bye. Live at Drew's house.